All right, folks, today we're going to brew an all grain beer today. We're going to do a porter. Let's go over some of the equipment we need to get that done. Let's look at some of the equipment that's necessary to do an all grain. There are several different methods, different ways and methods that can be done. This is how I do it. So, it's been years I've developed my own techniques, but right now we're going to talk about equipment. We'll go over technique here in a little bit. I'm going to start off with, we got a beer keg here. This is my, it's had the top removed. We've got water in there now. I got a temperature thermometer in there now. 15 gallon is the capacity on a keg when I'm doing all grain. This is only a 5 gallon batch. A lot of times I'll go ahead and do a 10 gallon batch because it takes just as much time to do 10 gallons of beer as it does to do 5 gallon. Now, one of the big differences between doing all grain and a kit beer is an all grain is, best way to put it, is an all day event. Generally it takes me 4 to 5 hours filming today. It might even take me 6, but we'll go over all that. So we're going to start off. This is our keg that we use it to heat our water and to boil our wort in. Now this is an igloo cooler. You can see where I got it. Got this at Home Depot. I've got it equipped with a stainless steel ball valve and tip here to go on to the hose. Inside, I got this at Northern Brewer. Got that online. Inside, here's the filter that I've made. It is simply a 24-inch stainless steel fill hose for a water heater. Take a Dremel or a hacksaw, cut the ends off, pull the silicone hose out of the middle, a couple of clamps on a 1/2 inch copper T, cut a little piece of 1/2 inch pipe. It's not high pressure, nothing needs to be soldered together. Clamp it all together, and there you go. This will filter any of the grains out from the wort. So this is the most efficient way I've found to do it. It beats the heck out of soldering copper pipes and cutting little grooves, and I've never had what's called a stuck sparge, meaning get clogged up, the hose and filter getting clogged up. Let's go on over here. Okay, you need some type of fermentation container or a brew bucket. I'm going to use a carboy called a big mouth bubbler so you can see what's going on inside. This is our cooling coil. We'll show you how that works here in a little bit. You've seen in my kit beer video. Something that I use with all grain is a filter funnel. This is a funnel. It's got a filter built in to filter out the hops and any extra grains that are left inside the wort. Handy piece of kit to have. Okay, with our fermentation bucket, you need an airlock and a stopper. Other items that you're going to need, a thermometer. I've got both a floating and a digital thermometer, so you need it to keep keep up constantly with the temperature of your grains while they're steeping. So I like to put the digital thermometer down low and the floating thermometer up high. That way you can see what's going on inside your container. Going Gonna need your stir spoon. That's my handy pointer here is my stir spoon. This is a plastic one. You can get stainless steel, however you want to do that. Another item you're going to need, this is iodine. You know, $5 for this iodine. It'll last me a lifetime. All right, ingredient wise, we've got our grains here. They're inside the sack. I had them ground for me at Steve's Brew Shop. Once again, I want to thank Steve's Brew Shop for being so good at what he does and having such a great selection. You need your recipe. I made this recipe. I used a software program called Beersmith, and it breaks everything down for you. So inside our grains, we've got 4 pounds 4 ounces of 2-row malt from Great Britain. We've got 4 pounds 4 ounces of 6-row American. There we've got 1 pound of flaked barley. We've got 7 ounces of 20L and 40L crystal malt. Those are malts that have been roasted to a darker color. We've got 8 ounces of aromatic malt. We've got 8 ounces of chocolate malt, 8 ounces of special B, and 4 ounces of black patent. Those will give us our color, okay? We've also got 1 pound of flaked oats. Now the flaked oats and flaked barley don't really give you a lot of fermentables. What they do is they give you a creamy mouthfeel, a smooth texture to your beer, make it feel thicker than what your average beer is. So when you're, you know, a lot of people have had Guinness. It has that thick, creamy feel to it. I like that in a porter. Also, it gives wonderful head retention, so you get that foam head on your beer, and it really stays there nicely. Next is our hops. We're using Fugel. Fugel is this is a U.S. Fugel. It's grown in the United States, but it's a British hops. Has a real mild, woody, a little bit of a fruit. Any English style beers, this is a great hops to do. We're going to use 2 ounces of that. Next is our Irish moss. Irish moss, I believe, is dried seaweed, and what that does is it helps get all the solids to fall out of the beer or the wort before we start our boil or during our boil. So when we cool things off, all that settles to the bottom and you don't have to fight getting it out as much. Other pieces of equipment I don't have out here. We'll have my carboy out here, and we'll have our auto siphon. Those will show up later in the video. But until then, we're not going to worry about it. Let's talk about what we're going to do next. All right, as you can see with our digital thermometer, our water is heating up. It's up to 104 degrees. What I'm going to do is bring that up to about 180, and I'm going to take that water and I'm going to add it to our igloo cooler over here and put the lid on. Okay, what that'll do is preheat the igloo cooler, so when we do when we do mash in, meaning add our grains to our water, we don't have to worry about the igloo itself pulling heat out of that water as the insulation in the container tries to come up to temperature itself. So until we get to that point, we'll be right back. There's Buddy the brew dog keeping an eye on things. If you don't have your brew dog around, it makes for a long day. Alrighty, we're almost there. We're at 178 degrees. You know, I said this is a craft that you have to have patience for. Well, I ended up losing some patience, and one of the cool things about being a contractor is sometimes you have access to some cool tools. So down here, I cranked out the roofing torch, put it up under the keg, brought things up to temperature pretty quick. So we're going to get the camera adjusted here, get things ready to start moving some water. All right, there's our alarm. We're going to start moving some water. One thing that's really nice about the igloo coolers is you can't see it on camera, but inside the container it has the markings for our measurements in both US gallons and liters. So we need 4.5 gallons. And that's what we're going to do. And when our temperature drops down to 168 degrees, we're going to start adding our grains in. Now let's see if you can get on camera here. We're at 176 degrees, so you know, just a few more degrees to drop down, but that gets our igloo up to temperature. We'll be back when we get to that temperature.
Well, we're down to temperature, so it is time to start mashing in. I'm going to start with our oats. You're adding your grains. Main thing is you don't want big lumps. Early on, it's not an issue. It smells like oatmeal. Next is our flaked barley. That's a pound of each. Next is our barley grain. Oh, Buddy the beer dog getting fired up. So we'll let him entertain us while we stir in our grains. Now that smells good. Buddy and the neighbor's border collie like yelling at each other through the fence. Mainly when I'm out here, I guess he's protecting me, huh? All 9 pounds of him. I mean, border collies are such a threat anyways. That is the last of it. Got himself good and tangled up. Make sure we got no dry spots and get it scraped down off the edges. The barley naturally has an enzyme called amylase. and that amylase breaks those grains down into sugars. So it takes a complex carbohydrate and breaks it down into sugar. Now I'm going to put my floating thermometer in high. I'm going to shove my digital thermometer in low. Oop, wipe the camera. We're going to put our lid on, and we will be back in 45 minutes.
We are halfway through mashing in, and we are sitting perfect at 156 degrees. The recipe calls 156 for 45 minutes. We're doing well. I'll keep it up. Well, folks, our timer just went off. It has been 45 minutes, and our Igloo cooler has held it perfect at 156 degrees the whole time. We're going to give it a stir here. Basically, you know, this is what they call a mash. Give it a stir. I'm going to get a little bit of the liquid in here in this little ramekin. It's going to be tough to see, but what we will do, we are going to put a couple of drops of iodine in there. Okay, see, it did not turn red. So we have had our conversion to sugar. We're in good shape. That we don't put back in. So now you can see I've got a 5-gallon stainless steel kettle down here with my funnel and the filter on it. I want to start just a very slow drain. This is a porter. It's a really dark beer. That chocolate and that black grain that's in there, that's where it gives it that color. Remember the barley and the oat flakes, that's where it gives it that smooth, creamy mouthfeel. We got a little drain going here. You'll notice our water draining slowly here. I want to pull this temperature probe out of here. Let that drain down for a second. Now over in our kettle that you saw earlier, I've got another 7 gallons, 8 gallons of water in there that I brought up to 168 degrees. Now, essentially what we're going to do with that water is rinse these grains. All that sugar that's in that wort, we don't want to leave it in there with those grains. So what we will do is called sparge the grains. It's essentially a rinse. That's what it is. So let me grab my container. I do it a half a gallon at a time. And I will just slowly pour this in the middle, the first half gallon. We only want to disturb the very top layer of grains. I kind of watch this gap down here. You can see it's dropped about a half an inch or so. don't want to keep going up and down, up and down. Raise it up about a 1/4 inch. Let it catch up. Let the grain go back down. All right, we're going to take a break here for a second. Let that work go down a little bit. Be right back. All right, we're back. You'll see we've dropped about 2 inches this time, and the grains are just now starting to expose themselves again. That the mash will compact itself as we do our sparge, do our rinsing. Now this is basically a little dog water bowl. Don't worry, it's been through the dishwasher. I don't feed Buddy the brew dog with this. This is a little trick I've learned from a friend of mine whose dad's Austrian, and this is how he sparges his beer when he brews it. All right, we got another 1/2 gallon here. This puts that sparge water, that rinse water, over that outside portion of the grains. It also helps keep you from disturbing those grains. What we're trying to do is keep our proteins and our particulates out of our wort. We just want to rinse the sugars out of it. Now we will go back and forth between the middle and the outside, a total of 3 times each for 6. So we're adding just a little over 3 gallons of water to our wort. And I'm not going to sit here and bore you with that. So we will be back whenever we start to get our wort in our kettle. Well, we're down to the nitty-gritty here. We've got our final sparge rinse going down. You can see the grains are down, and you can see, and Buddy the beer dog's still going. You can see that our wort is much clearer than what it was. This beer is about the color of coffee, and I'll let these dogs shut up for a minute. Buddy, go on. Go on, no. Well, you heard me tell the dogs to shut the hell up, but as you can see, we're not near as dark as we were. We're about the color of a heavy tea, but nowhere close to that coffee, or some people say root beer. So we are going to get our, oh, it looks like we're about done. We got any left? We got a little bit left in there. We want to get all that goodness out of it. Now what you don't do ever is mash down on those grains. Okay, if you mash down on those grains, you will get proteins in your beer, essentially gluten, and when you do that, you're going to have a cloudy beer. So don't ever squeeze your grains. So we're going to take our what's left. I've already poured off 1 batch. I'm gonna get the rest of this into the bulk keg. Here's our keg. I'm gonna pour the rest of our wort down in there. already have our gas turned on, so we're getting things heated up. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. Now, one thing that you do want to do, this is sticky. It's essentially sugar water at this point, and you do not want to get it on you. You also don't want to crank your fire up so much on your boil kettle that you end up scalding it on the bottom, because that will result in one nasty tasting beer. You've all smelled burned sugar before, and it's no bueno. So we're going to get this up to a boil, and we're going to get things cranking. Now that we got our beer in our boil kettle, it's time to pop a beer of my own. Now, this is a home brew that is a mystery to me. Went to my storage closet and I found a 4-pack of these with no labels on them. They're at least a year old, so I couldn't begin to tell you what it is, but let's take a pour and take a look. Smells good, got good smoke off the top. Stop pouring before there is yeast in the bottom. This is a bottle condition, so we'll stop pouring. From the looks of this, it looks like one of my Irish Reds. Oh yeah, that's a lagered Irish Red right there. You know, one of the things that people always ask is, what's the difference between lager and an ale? Well, a lager it's basically the yeast and the temperature that it was fermented at. An ale is essentially brewed at room temperature, cellar temperature. You want to try to keep it at 72 degrees to 62 degrees or so in there. You know, some people are going to scream, no, it's supposed to be this. Well, you know, I brew at room temperature. Don't worry about it. Have not had a bad beer come out yet. When you lager, you use a lager yeast, and generally you start off at about 55 degrees, and I'll go for 2 days at 55 degrees. Then I've got a refrigerator with a special temperature controller, and I will drop that temperature 5 degrees a day until I get down to 40 degrees. Then I'll drop it 2 more degrees to 38. Then we'll let that sucker go almost a month. It's a slower fermentation, but it's that crisp, clean. You can feel the carbonation. It's that clean beer that everybody's used to drinking when there's Budweiser or Miller Lite or things like that. That crispness that you get with a lager. At least that's what I get out of it. But that's essentially the difference. An ale is brewed at a warmer temperature, uses an ale yeast, and then a lager is brewed at a much cooler temperature, and it takes a lot longer. You'll hear brewers say it takes 21 days. Well, that's about right. And then they're an ultra-controlled environment that they're doing that in. But there you go. That's the difference between a lager and an ale. Cheers. It'll be hard to tell, but this is my garden. I got a few carrots left. There's some cherry tomatoes going. The scallions have bolted. Still got a few eggplants coming on. But I throw my grains in my garden. We'll till them under this fall. The birds will chew on them for a little bit, I'm sure. Buddy the brew dog will sniff around, dig around in them. But that's all you do. I throw them in my garden, I compost them. Alright, you can see that I put my chiller down in the wort. We're at 185 degrees or so. You'll kind of see the setup here. I put these clamps on here to hold my stir spoon in place, and then I take another spoon and I put a clamp in the middle, and that holds my digital thermometer probe in the middle without it being down on the bottom. At this point, you really don't have to have a thermometer, but I like to have it in here at the pre-boil to kind of let me know where we are, what's about to happen. And At 180, we start getting a little bit of a simmer going here. At about 195 or so, we'll get a foam up, and at that point your temperature will rise pretty quickly and get up to that 212 point and get to a full boil. When we get to that point, just before that point, we'll have what's called our break. We'll get all that foam that'll build up in here, and what that is those proteins coming to the top. They will make a big foam like the head of a beer, and then they will coagulate and drop back down into the beer. That's called the break. Okay, sometimes you'll have two breaks, especially when you're doing all grain. Generally when you're adding hops the second time, because you're giving more surface area for that for those proteins to boil off. But there we go. We'll be back when we get ready to break. Well, we're at 209 degrees. We're starting to get that simmer going, as you can see down in this area here. It's hard to tell behind it, but we got our simmer going. We're close to our boil, and you will see that foam start to build up as we get our boil. We're coming on. All right, we're at 210. Coming on up. To 11. Alright, well, my wife came out and asked me a question, but here we go. Alright, we're up to a full boil. We're at 212 degrees. And let's see what our break does. We might not have a huge break since we filtered and sparged well. So let's see where it goes. Okay, nothing dramatic here today. Not a great big break. We did a good rinse. This is where our timer starts, right here, with our first edition. My recipe calls for 1.5 ounces of the Bugles hops. Get it open here. Buddy the brew dog's over there raising hell. Let me show you what this looks like. The hops are pellets. Oh, they smell so good. All right, we're gonna add these in. It calls for 1.5 ounces. Add the next 1/2 ounce. And our timer starts right there. And we might have another little break at this point, but we're going to set our timer for 1 hour. Actually, I'm going to set our timer for 45 minutes, because at 15 minutes we will add the last 1/2 ounce of hops. So I will talk to y'all in 45 minutes. There's something wrong here. Not only did my Razorbacks embarrass themselves yesterday against South Carolina, but that glass is empty. So what happens? Oh, I see what happens. We go for another beer. Another homebrew. Okay, well, we'll do this one-handed with camera. Pouring it a little hard. Getting a little more head this way. As you can see, you keep pouring. And you leave the yeast. See how milky that is after I put it back? Swirl that around. Look down in there. That's real milky. That goes to Buddy the Brew Dog. I'll show you here in a second. All right, here's Buddy the Brew Dog. You want some beer? Oh, yes, yes, we had a little sample there. Oh, we can't wait. Somebody might scream animal abuse, but you know, he doesn't feel abused. He loves it. Besides, I'm not giving him enough to do anything to him. Oh, good stuff. That's why he's the brew dog. Right, buddy? Look at me. Nope, we're too busy drinking beer. Now, I know there's going to be some haters out there that scream, oh, that poor dog, you shouldn't feed him beer. There wasn't a tablespoon of beer there, but he absolutely loves it. Plus that yeast, with all that protein in that yeast, it's good for him. Might give him a little bit of gas, but you know, he passes it just like the rest of us. Anyways, he's okay, I promise. Well, here we are at the 45-minute mark. It's time to add that last half ounce of Fugels. What this will do, adding it this late in the boil, will give it, it's more aromatic. It won't add any real bitterness to it, but it will give it that real aromatic smell. And there we go. Give it a little stir. In 5 minutes, we'll add a teaspoon of the Irish moss. See you in 5 minutes. All right, here we are. 10 minutes to go. Ouch, that steam's hot. I'm going to add a teaspoon of the Irish moss. There's other things you can add. There's a Werflock tablet you can put in there. It does essentially the same thing. I don't know exactly what Werflock is made from, but Irish moss is made from seaweed. It's been dried, and that'll cause all that hops to fall and settle down to the bottom. All right, we got 10 minutes to go. One more ingredient. It's the secret ingredient to this porter, and I absolutely love it. All right, here is the my secret ingredient. 2 pounds of maple syrup. The original recipe, I had a cousin bring me some maple syrup from Massachusetts, from Woodville, Massachusetts, and that's where the name comes from for this porter, Woodville Moon. So not only does it have maple syrup from Woodville, Massachusetts, I put oak chips from oak barrels that have been soaked in moonshine, and we'll put that in later when we go into secondary fermentation with the with this porter. So we'll add the moonshine chips at that point. Nobody knows where I get my moonshine, but you know, we do live in the Ozarks, so that's all we're going to say about that. But I don't have any of the Massachusetts maple syrup this year, but this is an organic maple syrup, 16.9 ounces, just a hair over that. So this will be 2 more pounds, 2 pounds and an ounce of maple syrup that we'll go into. The maple syrup adds a real rich flavor, and you don't really catch it on the front end, but you catch it on the back end after you had a sip, and it's more aromatic at that point, but it really makes the beer nice and rich. So being a porter, this is the direction we're going. Just one more minute and we'll add that to our beer. Well, here we go, folks. We've been an hour. Turn our gas off, and it is time to add our maple syrup. You don't want to put this in during the boil because that syrup can settle to the bottom. It can scald quickly. So we do not want to burn this syrup, but we want to put it in at our high temperature. So we do want to add our syrup at this point. It's doubtful there's any sanitary issues with the syrup, but you know, it's better safe than sorry. So anytime you're adding honey or maple syrup or molasses or any type of sugar like that, you do it at the end of the boil after you've turned off your flame. So we're going to give this a good stir. Because that syrup is thicker and heavier than the wort, it'll settle to the bottom. Also, I want to get a good swirl going here because that Irish moss that we added. We'll swirl all that hops together and any proteins we got left, and it'll settle in. All right, let's go turn on our water and get this thing cooled down. And here we go. You'll hear it. Get the air bubbles out. Had a kink in our waistline hose. So here we go. We got our water going through our coolant line. We are cold here and we are hot here. We will get this cranked down. All right, back after we've cooled off. It's been about 5 minutes, and you can see how fast the temperature is dropping. Looks like I fell down and got against the metal. But it's amazing how fast this chiller brings the temperature down. I mean, it sucks the heat right out of that wort. Well, we are down into the 80s, 86 degrees, and it's kind of gotten stuck there, so I believe that's about as low as we're going to be able to get today. So we're going to put in our auto siphon. We're going to get it going and get our wort down into our carboy. Nothing exciting to see there. There's our carboy, starting to fill up with our maple porter. I used to add vanilla to this. Tried a couple of different ways of doing it, putting vanilla bean, vanilla extract and stuff, but in secondary fermentation it really gets lost. So I've given up on the vanilla part of it. You know, you just wanted some background notes in there. So we are sticking with the maple. There it is going into our carboy. And we are about to be happy. Started out at 2 o'clock this afternoon, got a late start getting things together. It's now 6 o'clock, so we're 4 hours into this. So when you're doing whole grain, it's definitely a labor of love. But you know, that's the way you do it. That's the way it's been done for centuries. The Egyptians started brewing beer. The Europeans fine-tuned it, and you know, beer is actually brewed on every continent throughout the world. So it has since ancient times. So I'm going to get out of your hair. We're going to speed this process up here and get inside. Well, here we go. We have moved inside. Look here. I mean, it is as dark as coffee, and that is what we're looking for. So next thing we're going to add in is a little, since we had all that syrup in there, we're going to add yeast nutrient. We're going to put a teaspoon in there per gallon. We're not going to go quite that far. We're going to do a half a teaspoon. And I am just going to eyeball it. Now I got a teenager in there raising cane, so if you hear any strange noises in the background, it's just a teenager. So about a teaspoon and a half of that. Next thing we're going to do is aerate it. We're going to add oxygen to it because the yeast needs that oxygen to get kick-started. So that's what we're doing next. Well, before we do that, we're going to get our tag made out. Today is 10/8/17. This is our maple porter. Let's see what our original gravity is before we get things stirred up. So, let's get this off. Get our hydrometer. Dip it in our sanitizer. Let's see where we are. It is on up there. We are at 1.8. So we will plug that into Beersmith and measure it against where we end up. So we got our drill. We got our aerator. That should be plenty. Get that down in our sanitizer. Now you see why we checked our gravity first. We got that nice head built up on here. Now this is a new yeast for me. This is an imperial yeast. It's an A38. 20 billion cells in this little can, and we're going to give this a whirl. All right, the instructions say to never to shake. Wow, that sucker had some CO2 pressure in it. It is bubbling away. Look at there. Now, we're supposed to pour a quarter of it in, swirl it around. I'm going to take my hydrometer, give it a little stir. Oh, that smells good. Now this is a yeast. It is it's a British yeast, A38. It is for a little heavier British style beers. So this is what it's made for. Get our turkey baster out here. Look at that color. Swirl that around. Get all that yeast out of the bottom. And put her in. Let's get our lid back on. Give it a little dip in our sanitizer. Can't hurt. Got our airlock in, it's good and tight. Now, we're going to let this go for 3 days. Then I will add in another 3 teaspoons of the energizer. I'm sorry, the yeast nutrient. After that, let's see, 10 to 14 days into it, we're going to take it out of this carboy. Look, it is already bubbling. That yeast was ready to go. We're going to take it out of this carboy, put it in another one like this, and at that point we're going to put in 1 cup of our whiskey chips and impart that flavor into it. Also at that time, we're going to put in a teaspoon of gelatin, which is a clarifying agent, which will help everything fall and settle out and clear our beer. Now, this Kreuzen, this foam, should stay here. The reason I did use this 6-gallon carboy, I would need the head space because the last couple times I've done this, the Kreuzen has grown way on up here. And if you use this style, then you can have a fountain. It actually hit the ceiling. And I've got the stain and the pissed off wife to prove it. Just one more thing about our original gravity. The recipe calls for a 1.79 original gravity. So we came out at a 1.9, that little bit of extra maple syrup. You shouldn't have made that way, but what that tells me is we came out way better on our efficiency. Look at there, we're already bubbling. That yeast is that happy. Our efficiency, meaning we got more sugar out of the grain than what is expected. So I'll blame that on that constant temperature using that igloo. It stayed at 156 degrees for the whole 45 minutes. So see you guys in 2 weeks, and we will be putting this in a fresh carboy. Oh, we got another bubble. I am real happy. By the morning, this thing's going to be going nuts. I might show you a teaser if I do. All right. In 3 days, we're going to add some more nutrients. That's really not that interesting to show. But in 10 days, we're going to rack this off into another carboy at our whiskey chips. We'll check back in back then. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.